Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us. My name is Ben Prue. I will be moderating the session today. We appreciate that you took the time and stepped away from your work to be able to come in and go through this with us today, looking at the land management strategy framework. It's going to be a pretty simple process. We're going to run through about a 20-minute presentation to kind of go through where we are, how we got here, where we're heading with a few different pieces of next steps. And then after that presentation, we'll open it up to you. We are here very specifically to hear from you. We want to hear your input. If you have questions, we're obviously happy to answer those as much as possible as well. And so we will leave plenty of time to leave space for you to provide that feedback and get into a bit of a discussion. Just to lay the floor for where we are right now, we are joined by Brian Piers and Bryce Serena with the MD, who will be up here a little bit later on as well. And again, we are here openly listening to what you have to say. No decisions have been made yet. This won't go to a decision-making process until, as you'll see later, end of 2024, early 2025. So that leaves us lots of room to be able to hear your input and bring that back to council as part of the review that they're undertaking. Following this process and the closing of the surveys, we will be doing a report that goes back to council to kind of outline what we've heard predominantly from leaseholders and residents who attended these sessions. If you haven't already had a chance at the table when you walked in, if you don't want to fill out that survey online, there are hard copies of that as well, which I'll get into a little bit later on. You can also grab a copy of the presentation if you want to follow along or make notes as you go. But basically, we're in this because the council and the MD are looking at how to approach the land management strategy and associated policies to make sure that we can move forward with effective land policy and lease administration. This stems from dating back to the 1930s. It wasn't the MD at the time. It was the local jurisdiction that had control over this area at the time. Had many lands that were given to that jurisdiction through tax arrears. And at the time, the jurisdiction didn't have the capability or the capacity to handle those lands, so they were given to the province. And then starting in 2009, those lands started being recovered by the MD, accounting for about 58,000 acres of tax recovery land. And then the MD holds title to around 23,000 acres of pasture and dry land cultivation land, which are separate from those tax recovery lands, adding up to around 82,000 acres of land in total that we're looking at here. Now, for all of those lands, the leases expire either in 2026 or 2027, which is why we're in this process now. This isn't a process being undertaken for any other reason than to align with the lease expiries so that we can set up what's going to be taking place to move forward after those terms end. And so council is looking at how to move forward in that process, and we want to hear from you as part of that. Now, those lands are obviously divided amongst tax recovery grazing lands, MD grazing lands, and MD cultivation lands, amongst around 92 leaseholders. Looking at the tax recovery lands specifically, these were the lands which were forfeited and which the MD began recovering in 2007. Those are currently spread amongst 34 private and community pasture leaseholders, and with a current rate of 70 cents an acre or $3.20 an AUM. That's the rate that was set 20 years ago, or close to. In 2006 is when that was set on a 10-year lease term. In 2016, that returned for discussion, and it was decided at that time to continue with that rate. So that rate is unchanged since 2006. Under these tax recovery lands, leaseholders can assign their leases to immediate family members or independently sell their leasehold interest to another eligible party. And in doing so, the MD receives an assignment fee of $150 per AUM or around $5,000 per quarter section. For the tax recovery land specifically, leaseholders receive $400 a year for each oil and gas lease located on their lease area. There's no maximum to that. And with the way that it's been going, typically leaseholders receive more in O&G compensation than they spend on rent at this time. Now, the MD has been approached over the years with a number of proposed uses or alternate uses for these tax recovery lands. We've listed them here just kind of as an overview of the types of pieces that have come forward. Obviously, the MD has not moved forward with any of these, but we did want to include it just to say some of these are, the examples of the proposals that have come forward for alternate uses. Looking at MD of Taber grazing lands, again, same rates of 70 cents an acre, 320 in AUM. These are on a 10-year lease, also expiring in February 26. And leaseholders, again, can assign those leases to immediate family members. A little bit different here with leaseholders not able to sell their leasehold interest. And for O&G, they're looking at leaseholders potentially receiving a maximum of half of their rent back per quarter section in oil and gas compensation. And then finally, the MD cultivated lands. These are split into two categories, the tendered and the non-tendered. As I'm sure you know, the non-tendered are those which have just rolled over consistently with the same leaseholders at a rate of just over $71 an acre. And the tendered are those which were surrendered back to the MD and then tendered out. And those are at a rate of just over $98 an acre. The cultivation land leases are on a 3-year lease term with no consideration for oil and gas compensation, and that was determined in 2021. So this kind of lays the plain picture of everything kind of comparatively. I'm going to let Brian come up and speak a little bit more in detail to what's being seen here as well.
Thanks, Ben. So each one of these tables represents the different types of leases that the MD administers. Ben has talked about the different acres and the types of leases, but this is some of the details that surround each one of those types. So on the top, we have the tax recovery lands, which is the bulk of the MD-owned lands, around 58,000 acres. We haven't tendered any of those leases. They're all currently with 34 leaseholders, and say some of those are private leases ranging from 1 quarter up into 20,000 acres of some of the community pastures. Rate at 70 cents an acre. I guess just of note here, on 58,000 acres of land, the MD generates about $40,000 in grazing revenue. So it's not a lot of money. It shows that it's a pretty fair rate that we've been charging for 20 years. On those lands, there's significant oil and gas infrastructure. So we do get just over $1 million in surface rentals from those lands. And interestingly enough, there are oil and gas payments that we do pay back to leaseholders, like Ben mentioned, $400 per lease site. No cap on that relative to the rent they pay, and that equals about $165,000 a year. So this is a significant amount relative to the grazing lease revenue that we receive. On the traditional MD grazing leases, these are lands, I guess, if you weren't clear on between the distinction between the two, these are lands that the MD's held for decades, that came back over traditional tax forfeiture from decades and decades. Some of these lands have been with families for 50 to 60 years. But in some cases, those lands have been surrendered back to the MD. They have no family to assign them to, or they're retiring, and so we have 1,400-ish acres of that with 6 leaseholders, and when we do put those out for tender, we get significantly more rent than we do on our reoccurring grazing leases, to the tune of about $93 per acre, and generating $32,000 in grazing revenue on those 1,400 acres. On the non-tendered leases that we get 70 cents an acre on, significantly more land and a third of the rent. So it just goes to show that when we tender land, we get more rent. It's as simple as that. Still a significant oil and gas base on these lands as well, and very little oil and gas money paid back to the leaseholders just because of the terms of the lease. On the bottom there, the cultivation leases. Again, Ben mentioned between the tendered and non-tendered. When the council sets the rates on the non-tendered leases every 3 years. The current average on those lands is about $70 an acre. When we do tender, we reach rental rates of upwards of $100 per acre. Oil and gas as well, and that we, as the MD, receive, and we do not pay anything back to the leaseholders in that case. So that's about it. I just on the bottom the note that as gross revenue, the MD generates about $2 million from the MD lands each year.
Perfect. Thank you, Brian. So as we go through this process, obviously this is the kind of the current state of where we are right now. There are a number of considerations that are accounted for as this process is being undertaken, one of which is looking at what's done elsewhere, looking in terms of other lease comparators. So we've tried to include some different types of comparators. You can see there's a couple of municipalities in Vulcan and Lethbridge counties up there, a couple of irrigation districts, and then Crown lands in the Crown Leases and Special Areas Boards. Now looking specifically at the municipal rates with Vulcan and Lethbridge counties, the MD is the lowest rate amongst those. The MD is the lowest rate amongst all of these. But the closest comparator in these cases would be the Crown land, which is in the middle there. And obviously there's differences in circumstances associated with the different lease rates. But we try to get as many close comparators as we can and to make them as relevant to this process as we're able to. There's also a number of environmental considerations that play into the discussion, not exhaustively listed here, but it is worth noting that around 70% of Alberta's dry mixed grassland has been lost, largely to development over the years, but certainly for some other reasons as well, and that the mixed grassland region contributes to around 75% of Alberta's species at risk. So that is something that's considered in there as well, along with soil classification, vegetation classification, irrigation ratings, environmentally significant areas, and then a number of other parameters, just to kind of show the complexity of the topic at hand and in everything that's being explored as we go through this. Now, alongside of that, we're obviously doing all of the public consultation pieces, including you being here right now. So we do have the public survey open. That opened at the end of last month, and it's going to be open until the 28th of this month. We do encourage you to go and fill that out. You can access that through the municipal website, through the MD site. We also, again, do have the hard copies available here. If you don't want to fill it out online, you're certainly welcome to fill it out in hard copy format. If you happen to get it done before you leave here today, you can hand it in to us, but we don't expect that. You can take it with you, and if you're able to, if you're coming into Tabor, you can drop it off at the MD office. You're also welcome if you're unable to bring it in for one reason or another, reach out and we'll find a way to collect that from you as well. We want to make sure that we make it as easy as possible for you to participate. And then we do have the 4 town hall sessions. So we had Hayes on the 11th, we had Vauxhall yesterday, and then later on in the evening tonight we'll have another one here at 7 o'clock. And so we set it up to try and make it accessible to everybody, give you different times, to give you different locations to, again, get as much input from you as possible. There are a couple of other considerations that we just have to account for. One of them being the financial stewardship piece, with council making decisions on the land management strategy and associated policies, recognizing the impact that they have on the MD as a whole and everybody in it. And then the legal obligations, these tie back to the Municipal Government Act. This is a provincial piece of legislation that guides council's actions, including that no decision is going to be made prior to the issue being brought before council, and that decision has to be made in a public setting. Obviously, all of you are welcome to attend when that does come forward to a council meeting. And then finally, that council is obligated to make a decision that they deem to be in the best interest of the entire MD. So this fits into, we have the public consultation piece that we've talked about. This fits into a larger bucket of everything that's being considered by council as they look at that decision-making process. Again, we will be doing, coming out of this and the survey, we will be doing a What We Heard report, which basically states everything that we've been hearing from all of you. And then that will be tied in with recommendations from administration based on best management practice, the jurisdictional comparators that we quickly went over there, and then some other data collection, research, and analysis that's going to be taking place as we move forward here. which will drive those next steps. And I'm going to let Bryce speak a little bit further onto what those might look like coming forward.
Thanks, Ben. Yeah, Ben did such a good job. I'm actually just going to do a little bit of a recap, really just as a bit of a summary, providing some next steps as well. So as a summary and to summarize some of the previous steps that have been accomplished to date, we've established the project mandate, the project objective, essentially the guidance of the future the lease administration here at the MDA Taber. So that is really what the goal of the project is. As part of a project team, many of you have met Brian Piers. He's our manager of lands, planning and development. We've also acquired resources through Integrity Land that's provided us some comparators, some of the earlier comparators that we've received already that we presented today, that we'll also be reaching out to do further comparators. We've got acquired the skills of Ben here with Catalyst Communications, so to help us with packaging up the information so that it's available, it's understandable. We'll go into a little bit more on the public consultation here in a few minutes. As well, myself with the Director of Community Services. And as far as going forward, we've established to date this level of a baseline of a background, history. We're looking at current state, the comparators that we presented today, as far as with the irrigation districts, with Crown comparators, as well as comparators in municipalities neighboring, so the regional comparators in the grazing environment as well as the cultivation leases. Our public consultation is essentially what we're here today to do, and what we've done in Hayes and Vauxhall and this afternoon here at 7 o'clock tonight. It really is about trying to accomplish the task of reaching out to the public to make sure we get feedback. So we get your comment, we get feedback from the public as part of our project. So from a project team perspective, we see this as absolutely critical as we move forward. We want to make sure that that's included. We've also included information from a communications strategy perspective. We have information available on our website, so we do very much encourage everyone to reach out, take a look at the website. We try to post all of our packages of information online. That includes information about today's meeting. Our presentation package is also available on there. So we've also included done a public mail out that includes some of the information that you saw in the chart earlier, and so that's intentional to get that information out so you can read it. So if you have any questions, you can reach out to us. As far as moving forward, from a project team perspective, we want to share just at a very baseline the level of complexity, and we very much understand that. So we are looking at that complexity as breaking it down into different pieces and looking at things like the various lease types, looking at the terms of the leases at a granular level, looking at the agricultural and environmental aspects that were mentioned here in the presentation, and that I'll speak out the acronyms a little bit more. So soil inventory data, which is a representation of the quality soil types in the area. Also looking at the Canada land inventory, which identifies the potential for agriculture productivity across the region. Historical significance that was mentioned. Irrigatability, to get that right. Got to say that. Irrigate. Thank you. Again, so it kind of rolls off the tongue a bit. You got to get it right, but yeah, absolutely. And so environmental sensitive areas was also mentioned. Historical significance. And really looking at this information as a municipality, looking at it across the municipality, starting to look at it from trends, adding it in the form of index value-added information so that we can start taking a look at the lands as a whole, looking at different pieces of the projects, and then getting granular with that so that we can start getting some of those analytical pieces done. We can start getting some information packaged up and understood. As far as looking at the individual leases from a management perspective, of course, we have to take a look at some of the management type of aspects of the program. And so what does it mean to manage leases in the current state, in different states? And so, of course, we'll be looking at that, as well as rental rates, contributing value. So land value has been identified, environmental value, we've named a number of them, industry value, revenue value. And so these things will all be looked at as we go through the project. And really, at the end of the day, as we move forward, they all package out into recommendations. They package out into what we consider to be management practices, information for council for consideration as we move forward with the project. So today, we really want to make sure that we're gathering as much as we can as far as information. So please do participate, and please do ask as many questions as you have. And we certainly are here to listen. So I will leave you with that. Thanks, Ben.
Perfect. That actually brings us to the end of the formal presentation portion. We have quite a bit of time to hear from you. So if you have any thoughts or feedback that you'd like to provide, or if you have any questions on anything within this or the process, we're happy to hear those. Feel free to stand up and try and speak loudly enough that everybody in the room can hear you. And we're happy to give you as much time as necessary. And we do want to hear from everybody who's willing to share. Yeah, go ahead.
Quick question on the tendering process. Were those, obviously there's a big difference between the non-tendered and the tendered. Were they tendered when, 2016 or 2006? Or when would that have?
I'll let Brian speak to that a little bit further.
So you're asking specifically for the cultivated lands or the grazing lands?
I see the information and there's a
Yep.
big gap, and I'm just wondering, is that gap in actuality even bigger given what's happened to land prices and rental rates? Or are these fairly recent tenders?
Certainly. No, they've spanned over several years. It's probably of the last 6 or 7 years where we started getting these leases that were returned to us that we have tendered. So they all haven't been in the last 2 years. No, it's been. And as we go forward, though, as you can expect, the rates that we receive are higher as we get as more recently. Yeah.
Well, I guess I can start it all up so people can start yelling, but I don't have MD leases. I have lots of provincial leases. I think government should govern and they shouldn't even own land. They should sell it. But that's probably neither here nor there. Yeah, unless it's protected or something. But when you're doing these tenders, I like that CLH bid thing too, that I think it should be tendered every 10 years. And you put it on like that bid where it's open, you can see, so you don't miss it by $5 if you're the guy that's been on there. Do it a year and a half before, so you know if you're planning, you have to get rid of cows or buy cows. And it's open. The leases now have changed, like, from what they were supposed to be in the early 30s of grazing associations and stuff. They're not the same anymore. Now some of them associations got so much money that they sell their allotment for huge dollars instead of what they were meant to be for young people to start. That's almost a past. Not that many people have 20 cows anymore, and it's become a business itself. So why should they keep getting that lease renewed every year? Why can't it go up for tenders? And other people can look at it too if you can't get in on that lease.
Okay. No, that's exactly the. We're glad you spoke up, Keith. That's what we want to hear about different opinions and different ways different things we take forward to council. So, I do want to say that we have had very few discussions with council about what the terms of these leases or what we're going to do with these lands going forward is. So if you do ask specific questions about what it's going to cost, are we going to tender? Are we going to sell? What are the rates going to be? We don't know those numbers. We honestly have not gone down that path with council first. This was the first main step in the process. So you may be a little frustrated with that because if you were coming here hoping to get some answers, detailed answers, you're probably not going to get them, and you may be disappointed. But it's certainly, we don't feel this is a waste of time. It's important to hear from you folks. So. Yep.
Sort of echo those thoughts there. I'm not a leaseholder and have no intention of being a leaseholder, but I am a resident in the MD. And to me, I appreciate the history and I appreciate the benchmarking to what other districts are doing, what other communities are doing. But in the end, if I'm looking at the EID, they have their own considerations for why they're
Good.
I also think if it's your land, you should get 100% of the oil. The whole government, the biggest fight they've had was the land rights people.
Yep.
We're the ones that had millions of dollar oil revenue coming in. They said it's their land forever. Well, it's not their land, it's a government land. And it's your land. You should get all the oil revenue, yeah. If they come in and disturb a little bit, pay them a little bit that year, but take all the oil revenue. Then when the retender comes up, you just tender knowing there's an oil lease in there.
Right.
That you're not using. But
Okay.
you guys should keep the money under your land.
Okay, no, that's
And
all.
I have lots of land of oil revenue, so I think shooting myself, but I think it's stupid. It's a big fight. The government
Yeah.
needs to consider money.
That's right. Nope. Those are, as I look around our room, some of our staff, and they're all taking these notes. So this is good information. Yeah, it's all being absorbed, written down. So all part of the report that Ben's going to produce for us at the end of this. And then when you came into, if you gave your email addresses, when we do draft that plan, we'll be emailing out to everybody too what we've heard.
And what's the follow-up once you release your report in terms of potential implementation and the opportunity that we will have as residents of the area to make comment before it's actually finalized? But does that make sense?
Yes, it does, and that's come up at every session we've had so far. Is it that you're going to hear from the residents and the folks, the leaseholders, and then just make a decision and that's it? There's no discussion after that. So I think that's something we're going to take back to council too. We don't have a strategy for that as of yet, but it seems to be the desire of a lot of folks to hear kind of a second round or just here's what it is, give you a little time to comment on it back.
And that's my point.
Yeah.
If I'm to have these sessions and gather information, I think that's an important process to implement it for doing that. So the secondary part of it, which is more critical, is when we have the recommendations, what's our opportunity to revise some final input
Right.
before final decisions are made.
Okay. We'll note that as well. Yep.
Just a comment. I'd like to applaud the council for undergoing this, this framework, this study, and yeah, they do have a very important task of, running the MD in a manner that is good for the whole MD, and being accountable with all the resources that we have, including this land. And I would just warn them also, like, it's a very hot button issue, and I would be very careful that they avoid, conflicts of interest or those manners in doing this, because I think they are there. So.
Right. Each individual counselor is well aware of that as well. That's been another issue that's been brought up at every session, is that some of the counselors may or may not have pecuniary interest, they call, or conflict of interest that they have to be careful of. And the rules around that are defined in the Municipal Government Act as well, to how that works and doesn't work. So if you want more detail on that, Bryce has done a little more research on that. He'll probably speak to that before the end of the presentation as well, because it's not my forte, but just knowing that, yeah, it's definitely an issue that the council's aware of. Yep.
Sorry, at the risk of people getting tired of my voice.
No,
but one more thing
not at all.
is that I would much prefer recurring revenue streams from this land as opposed to a windfall.
Okay.
And that is not a reflection on this council, but instead it's I just feel a lot more comfortable, especially for future generations, if one council doesn't decide something on a windfall, and instead the decisions of future council are buttressed by this continuing revenue stream. So I would strongly advise an open tender lease as opposed to a sale of land.
Okay. No. Thank you for that. Yeah. Don. Yeah.
And I just follow up on what Alex, there's a lot of wisdom in what he is saying with regard to that. I was president of the RMA at the time that we went through the process of reacquiring the land. So we spent a considerable amount of time with the minister and also with the manager of special areas who had been involved with tax recovery lands. And we watched some jurisdictions get the land back and sold it, pocketed the money.
it's, we didn't bring that into the conversation, but yeah, as Don mentioned, there was about 23,000 acres of tax recovery land that the province deemed to be, or possessing in significant environmental attributes, and then they retained those. So they were scheduled to be returned to the MD in two different batches of land. In about 2011 and 2009, they opted to retain those lands, and we haven't been able to successfully acquire those back.
That we put together a tour and we brought down government officials,
Yeah.
deputy ministers, a couple of ministers, rented a bus, went out, and Ray Gilmore, who at that time was the deputy minister of municipal affairs, said, I understand all of a sudden, looking at this land, why this is so sensitive land.
Yeah.
It's sensitive because the government's making a lot of money off those land. And they did not want to give up that revenue stream. And it's land that was owned by the MDC legitimately, and all should do that. And he agreed with us on that. And I don't know where those discussions are, whether that belongs to the council, but we had tremendous support from the ministry at that time, for the most part.
Right. We've tried on several occasions through different governments to make that argument as well, and just we seem to get in the door a little bit, and then the government changes, and then you have to re-educate, and there may be different viewing different opinions on that each time. So we're kind of in the same mode right now. So we didn't really, since they aren't MD lands yet, we didn't really want to complicate the whole issue. And that, we can certainly talk about them, but yeah, it just wasn't part of the presentation today.
But I think it's important for people to understand the reason why we were so aggressive in going after and recovering this land, and that's when you got involved with
Yep.
this,
Yep.
Brian. Was an alternate revenue stream as opposed to just the enemy dollars that were coming from oil and gas.
Mhm.
To provide a buttress, if you will, to use Alex's term, in protecting the residents of the MD of Tabor and keeping our taxes down to a more reasonable
Right.
level than they perhaps otherwise might be.
Every dollar does help, for sure. Yeah, especially if they're unfettered dollars, you don't have to be targeted to a certain project or a certain program. Those are dollars that can be spent on graders or equipment or special projects. Yeah, it does make a difference, and I'm sure at budget time amongst council members.
And that brings up our concern, that once the report's there, we need to have that opportunity to comment
Okay.
on any recommendations that may be brought forward.
Okay, and Ben's nodding his head too, so we'll bring that back to council. Yeah.
That's what we've heard a few times now, yeah.
I think one of the things that's said about the oil revenue too, that would solve some of the problem. People say there's a problem that leases are getting too expensive because you're buying somebody else's lease off them, but it's based on oil revenue. And then that runs it up, and because they're just buying it for more money so you can get the oil revenue. If you took all the oil revenue and bring it back to about an even playing field and actually lease them.
That could have an effect. Yeah. Yeah. And as you all know, that own land in the MD of Tabor, that's continuing to become less and less over time too, just because of the state of the oil and gas industry too. So it's naturally occurring, as we're well aware. I think we have about 140 surface right board files that we have to apply for annually just to get our rent back from the province, which is unfortunate that we have to collect money for our operations through the general funds of the province to pay for defunct oil and gas companies, but that's the system that's at play, and a means to, as a landowner, to get those funds. This is all good discussion. Yeah, thanks for participating.
Any leases that come up between now and by the time your studies or decisions are gonna be completed, where maybe new, I don't know if these are 10-year leases that happen on some of this land, they all gotta be dealt with before you're completed.
Yeah, whether they're the 3-year cultivation leases, if they're surrendered back to us, we would tender them, but we'd keep them on the same schedule, I assume, to get them so where their expiry dates coincide with all the others. So we're not trying to match up timing on these leases. It's the same thing with the MD leases, if any of those are surrendered. today. If there was, we don't have any currently, but if there's some next year that are due again, and some of these have been rented over time too, that have been come back, so they come back in different years. So I think there probably is a few next year that will be up, and they're always advertised on our website or in the paper. Sometimes it's just here's a link to our website. It may not have all the details of every lease that we're putting out, but yeah, certainly. And then same thing with the MD grazing leases. They would coincide with the termination and the expiry, of those leases, the bulk of the leases that we have. I don't believe this year we had any, which was unusual this spring. We try to do it as early as we can too, February, March, so it gives folks an idea how to manage their year.
Leases that were last year tendered. I think there was a small one in grassy, one in purple.
Yeah.
So only went for 3 years till this is decided, or?
Right. Yeah. There's no grazing. There's no leases that go beyond the 2026. All right. I'll sit down. I'm sure there's more questions, and I'll come back up again if there is.
All right, we do still have plenty of time, so by all means, if you have any other thoughts, any other comments, we're happy to hear those as well. Barring that, we do have the room until 4 o'clock, and so after this portion is done, feel free to stick around and mingle. We'll obviously be here throughout that time, so you can talk with anybody one-on-one, and we're happy to hear those thoughts if you didn't want to say them in front of everybody or ask a question in front of everyone either. I'll let Bryce take over here.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. I thought there'd be some value in also just talking a little bit more about the pecuniary interest that was mentioned earlier. Just talking a little bit more. We do have, and I want to bring everybody's attention, there is a summary that is available on our website. And the summary that is on our website is the one I'm going to be referencing here today. It is based on legal advice that the municipality as a corporation has received on the pecuniary interest that exists in the MGA. So it is provided as direction through the MGA. Details around it, I'm not going to read it, word for word for you, but I'm just going to give you some information here that will just help with that, with processing what that means to the program and to the project and to decision making. The disclosure of a pecuniary interest for council, for an individual councillor, is required if they have a pecuniary interest. They have to identify that pecuniary interest on the specific task or the topic at hand. They have an opportunity. Each councillor has an opportunity in the meeting to identify that, and once they've identified that, when the topic comes up in the meeting through our procedures, they abstain from voting. They abstain from any discussion. And each councillor that does a pecuniary interest declaration would leave the room as well. So essentially the councillors that are in the room making the decisions would be the councillors that do not declare any pecuniary interest. And so this was provided, legal advice was provided in request for the corporation of the MDA Tabor, and it was specific to this topic of leases and that. So it's relevant. Each councillor as an individual councillor has to make the determination. So it is very much an individual choice that needs to be declared. And it's at the end of the day, I did share previously just some of my personal thoughts, and this is through my experiences with the MDA Tabor, is that really the MDA Tabor really does look at decision making. Although, based on, we have a number of wards, we have 7 wards in the MDA Tabor, but at the end of the day, decision-making projects, when we look at different topics at the MDA Tabor, in my experience, we've tried to essentially turn the lines off on the map. We look at topics as a whole, look at them as a municipality. Granted, there are some topics that exist for different areas, but council as a whole makes the decisions. So councillors that are available based on whether they have a pecuniary interest or not, the councillors that do not have a pecuniary interest that are voting on the topic make up council, they make up the vote. And so that decision then is upon them. We provide the information, on a project by project, on a topic by topic, a request for decision. We provide that information. Council has the opportunity to ask questions, and we then come back with information trying to establish to the point where a decision can be made. And so, as part of that process, we do follow that, and it is part of our processes. So, if there's any additional questions on that, we can try to answer a few more. But essentially, it is up to the individual councillor to declare a pecuniary interest. And again, it is under Section 172 of the MGA, so it is established in there. And it's if you want to read it further, there again, it is identified in the summary. So it's a pretty good information package available. Okay, thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. I'll do one last call for additional public comment question. Yeah, go ahead.
I guess the biggest question I have, I don't have any leases, but I have rented land before, and it is fun with the ups and downs of things. Relatively small farm, so it does affect you. But this was all new to me the last couple of months. I guess I never took an interest, my own fault. But as I see it, 8,000 residents are subsidizing 80 because they get free land. And I think if you put it to a vote of the 8,000 residents, they would probably vote against it. That would be the biggest thing. If you can't look at it any other way, it's basically free. You pay $110 for a quarter, and you may or may not get oil revenue. That's nice, but it's basically free land. And I don't think very many people know that. And I know many operations rely on it, but in all fairness, it's still a free ride based off the 8,000 residents. And that's my biggest problem. It needs to be at least adjusted. I have a little bit of pasture I rented out for $1 an animal a month. You guys are talking $30 a year as a going rate. So I don't even know where that number comes from.
Okay.
$1 a day is what I rent animals per animal. So I'm not sure where all the numbers come from, but I do have a fundamental problem that we're only certain individuals. If it's that important to stay at 70 cents, then it should be open to every MD resident to have access to it, because they're the ones inevitably subsidizing. That's my comment.
Thank you.
I'll take you down to my bank and she'll say, it's not free. It's not free at all. We have to buy it. Okay?
Then you tender it. Then it's tender fees. Is that not correct? If it's bought, it's tender.
No, we're talking about provincial land, crown land that we've had since the 40s that got turned back to the MD. Okay?
Why didn't you just buy it and take the title? It wasn't
You
for
can't
sale.
It's never for sale. But the provincial government's not gonna sell it, and the MD's not gonna sell it. So what?
I don't know, Bill. Like I said, I'm not involved, but as far as I can tell, the dates back to the 40s, you had a good deal for a long time. I don't know what's fair, but that's when it's that cheap. I don't know what else is fair.
No, we definitely appreciate all perspectives. We do want to hear from everybody, so thank you. Any other comments? All right, well, we can leave it at that for the formal portion. As I said, we will be around, so you're welcome to come and chat one-on-one and grab another donut, grab some more coffee, and thank you all very much for attending. We really appreciate it.